It's not a common story, but these events do occur. And it really
This is Dr. Kevin Coleman, who is a practicing general practitioner, still practicing.
Quickly. And you've probably seen these in the media yourself. So you can have a young mum who has a normal delivery, everything goes well, and then in 5 or 6 months, or something like that, the baby gets measles. And measles under the age of, in the first year of life, can be quite dangerous in some children. And that child may be admitted to hospital and may need support, but by and large children get through this. In a past generation, measles, in my generation, measles wasn't such an issue because prior to 1966 we weren't vaccinated for measles. I had measles, or my siblings had measles, my parents had measles. Measles came and went periodically. And within that, yes, there were some really difficult times for people. So 1 in 2,000 children would get encephalitis. 1 in 25,000 would get subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, which occasionally could be lethal. Subacute sclerosing panencephalitis would come some years later, and in 95% of children they didn't do so well, that they may die within 2 to 3 years. Having said that, we had no real understanding in those days of nutrition and how vitamin C and vitamin A and vitamin D may well change the way that disease manifests. So when Dr. Wakefield came out with his research suggesting that measles, mumps and rubella may cause problems, my patients were asking me, well, you know, what's going on here? And so I went researching, because I had always been very pro-vaccination and a bit blasé about measles, because I knew that most people who got measles would get through okay. But given now that in the last generation, the mothers coming through no longer have the inherent immunity to vaccines, no longer have the inherent immunity to measles, because that hasn't been passed on from their mothers. So there's a bit more vulnerability now.
That's what vaccines have done. So this is
why I researched. A guy by the name of Tom Jefferson, Unintended Events Following Immunisation with Measles, Mumps, Rubella, a systematic review based in 2003. And his conclusion was, the best you could do sincerely, exposure to measles, mumps, rubella is unlikely to be associated with Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, autism, aseptic meningitis, etc. But the design and reporting of safety outcomes in measles, mumps, rubella vaccination studies, both pre and post marketing, is largely inadequate. And I said, what the hell's going on here? You know? So I've been telling patients for years, look, I think this vaccine is probably going to be okay, not realising, as many of my colleagues didn't realise, that in fact the research around adverse events is just not there. And this is a huge problem within medicine, a massive problem. We have a lack of transparency within the system. We have a lack of transparency of the research, not just with vaccines but across the board. You know? So that the mother who got the mother whose child got measles in the first few months of life, they will come through that okay. And the benefit of having measles, which isn't talked about, is that child then has a resilience against future cancer later in life. Ditto with mumps. So these early childhood infections do indeed have a benefit.
Sorry for being so jumpy, my hand is getting sore.
And the vaccination is...
I need to buy a tripod.
So these are difficult decisions that parents must make. But for your own child, you know, there's no question that things can happen. Another not uncommon story, and I've seen lots of this, is that mum can have a difficult delivery or difficulty in labour. And so her doctors recommend she have an epidural. And then with the epidural, often there's an instrumentation, the baby will deliver by forceps, and then often, if the mother's had an epidural, 5% of those mothers will have a very significant fever due to the epidural. And then of course the baby will have a fever. And then the newborn baby has a fever, well, we've got to do a septic screen, that's just standard. We've got to do a lumbar puncture, we need to do a blood culture, a urine culture, and then treat the child with antibiotics. And that has a huge impact on the baby's microbiome, the developing microbiome. So the vaginal birth, the baby gets the really important bacteria from mum, and the baby's then put onto mum's breast and gets that colostrum. That has a huge benefit for the baby's evolving immune system, which if there's a Caesar, the child misses out on, and particularly if there's antibiotics. So let's go forward with this child's story. So after that birth and the antibiotics, all right, the child seems to go okay, and then the child has a vaccination, and the mother says, whoops, something's not right here, something's gone wrong. And indeed, as our lovely young mum just described to us now, often the mother will say, there's something wrong here, my baby, something's happened with this vaccine. So the scene is set by the medical instrumentation, sometimes the perinatal lack of oxygen, the disturbed microbiome, and with the leaky gut, there's a leaky blood-brain barrier. And with the leaky blood-brain barrier, there's a real vulnerability to environmental toxins, often vaccines. So we know that in terms of regressive autism, 80% of autism is regressive. They say the child seems to be going okay, and then following something, it could be scarlet fever, which we're seeing sporadic cases of now. It could be a vaccination, and often it's a vaccination. But there's some environmental injury that then disturbs the child's
Guys, I'm taking this down for just a minute to take the case off because the case is shaking.
They go backwards in their behaviour. Previously the baby was looking at you, engaging with you, and then there's something happening. There's that engagement. And the mothers know
that's
this,
easier to hold steady.
know their children.
Sorry about that.
And the doctors might say, you're just imagining this. It's just a coincidence. Don't worry, it'll be okay. I'm asking the mothers, listen to your intuition, because the mothers know.
What a beautiful message.
And if you then follow this child's trajectory through life, he gets his vaccinations. I'm talking about here because boys are affected 4 times as often as girls, and then down the track, difficult child, problem child. Your child's a problem maker. So at school they have difficulties relating, they have difficulties communicating. And later you might find this same child has so-called conduct disorder, where they just don't get on with people, they're provocative, they challenge, they get upset easily. And then this child ends up in front of the justice system and may resort to drugs because they don't have the comfort in social relationships. And this is what autism is. Autism is a spectrum of insult on the evolving emotional system.
I didn't do anything with the volume, I'm sure I didn't.
There's a little nucleus called the nucleus tractus
I'm sorry that
right near the
I haven't done
blood-brain
anything
barrier,
with the volume.
which marks the connection between the vagus nerve's connection to the higher centers.
Oh, there's a huge turnout. There's at least 1,000 people
and when Mum
here.
says she knew in her guts that something
Hannah,
wasn't right,
it's a great turnout.
She's really feeling
and no media. Bastards.
She really has that sense, that feeling, something's not right.
Oh, good, Annie, thank you.
And so her body is
I didn't do
talking to
anything,
her.
but thank you.
Her body is telling her something's not right here. People with autism sometimes miss out on that connection. They just don't know. They're not able to modulate their senses that are just flooding their system. And so they're overwhelmed with sensations. They can't interpret what's going on in the world. And they suffer. They suffer socially, they suffer emotionally. You know, they suffer in all sorts of ways. And there's an attempt now by the medical profession to normalise this. And can I say that people who suffer from autism, or Down syndrome for that matter, are human beings. They have feelings, they have needs.
Yep, exactly. Too scared.
And yet, trying to normalise
losing
this
profits,
insult by
that's what
denying
they're
that
scared
something's
of.
going on is terribly destructive. So I believe that vaccination,
But with or
and
without the
excessive
media, we got a
vaccination
great
that's
crowd
happening in
here.
our society
Gotta
is
tell
really
you,
a form of
fabulous crowd.
institutionalised abuse. And in a way, can I say that this when Tony Abbott came in with this no jab, no pay legislation, I thought, what the hell are you doing? This should have always been a conversation between the mother and her GP. But thank God he did come in with it, because now we're realising, many of us are waking up, that hey, look, something's not right here. And something is not right within medicine. I say I'm a practicing
Exactly,
GP,
Tanya.
a fellow of the
Money,
College of
money,
GPs,
money.
and I'm not the only GP or doctor for that matter who's aware of this problem. But the intimidation,
But one of the only ones brave enough to stand up and
currently
speak.
I'm under investigation for APRA for talking to this issue.
Of course he is.
I'm under investigation, or I've been notified by the AMA that they want to expel me because I'm bringing dishonour to the profession. BS, okay? We know, that before vaccines arrive, the major
Oh God,
ingredient
really,
for a healthy
Trish?
life, you
Far
can live
out.
a healthy life without vaccines. You can live a healthy life without vaccines.
Yes, you can.
And not without risk. And not without risk, but you can live a healthy life without vaccines.
Life has risk.
Okay? And what really is required is the basics. We need clean air, which is our first speaker spoke to. We need good sanitation. We need clean water. We need good nutrition. And can I say that, look, the three huge experiments on the human race, which have been happening in the last 40 years or so. One, GMO. There's been no good research to actually indicate that this stuff is really safe. Two, vaccination, because we haven't researched, as I've read, we haven't researched the unintended events following vaccination. And there are real hazards, as we've heard, associated with vaccines. Yes, look, I worked in Africa for 10 years, you know, and in the rural areas where there's malnutrition, there's poverty, there's lack of water, there's no question there that measles vaccine makes a big difference. Measles vaccine saves lives in that context. And yet,
guys, I'm going to stand up and just show you the crowd.
So well
Hang on.
they're stunted. And the underlying problems are growth, emotionality, connection. And apartheid South Africa was a vicious system, not so different to what we're going to experience in this country, I believe.
Because since I sat down, it's gotten much bigger.
Dr. Kalakarinos, that funny guy out in Colorenabri, New South Wales, who claimed that every second child was actually affected by the triple antigen, as was called. And I used to laugh.
How amazing is this?
I was in charge of infectious diseases.
How amazing is this crowd?
I was passionately pro.
Yep, MCHFR, that's a big one.
Until probably 9 years ago when I vaccinated myself, and a little while later found myself.
We've just got a huge crowd.
A little bit of a wake-up call.
It's fabulous.
So
anyway, I'll give you back to the doctor again. He's brilliant.
But on further reading, you start to realise that although the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine can have a benefit in marginalised, malnourished,
no media, that's right, Tanya.
Not so for the triple antigen, not so for the whooping cough, diphtheria and tetanus. Those populations do worse, as Archie discovered in Colorenabri, and that research has been repeated recently in the Guinea-Bissau by WHO research. So vaccines aren't all safe. They have a place, and sometimes less is better. And I think the less vaccination, the better. And I think it's got to be your choice. And as an agent for your child, as an agent for your precious child, you need to make that decision for your child. This idea of co-opting or pushing you out of responsibility and forcing vaccinations is doomed to have problems. And we're seeing at the moment, 1 in 4 children has asthma, 1 in 3 children have allergies.
Guys, I might be speaking after him, so if so, I'm just going to close this really quickly. My apologies.
Autism spectrum disorders. This is a huge issue. And you'll often hear now that the way I think that the very nasty way, the very sleazy way, can I almost say, the collusion between the medical profession, big business, the media, the pharmaceutical industry, and also I think the erosion of our public health system in this country. So when I was going through public health, we had some degree of independence, and we did marvellous research around the lead abatement program. And since lead has been removed from the environment by removing lead from petrol, we've seen a substantial improvement in teenage boys now, and girls, but teenage boys not having as much behavioural difficulties and we've seen a lower crime rate. So the drop in crime rate we saw in New York, which was well documented, was due to the removal of lead from the petrol. And yet we're still using aluminium and mercury and other compounds in vaccines. We've got to say, look, that doesn't make sense. There's something not right here. So, in terms of our own public health system, it's been underfunded for years.
Tanya, someone else is going to be filming me, and I've asked them to share it when they're done. So if they don't share it on the wall, I'll make sure that I share it. Yep, Annie, someone is going to be filming it. It's okay.
Between Sanofi, Pasteur, which is one of the largest vaccine producers.
Yeah, I could do that. I could do that. Hannah, I'll see if I can find someone to do that, okay?
South Australia.
That's a very good idea. Good thinking.
In collusion, I say, because no one will speak out against vaccines when you've got that cushy relationship with big business, which is actually enhancing your careers. And public health doctors also have mortgages and have incomes to protect. And so that within the biomedical research system, anyone who touches this, or any GP who questions the total beneficence of vaccines, is targeted. So within the system, I know that there's a very lovely colleague of mine who does wonderful work in this state, in this city, in kids with autism, and he's apologetic around not being able to speak out because he's afraid, and I can understand that. But we need more doctors to speak out.
You think someone's not going to give my phone back, Annie?
I might just ask if you could consider looking at monkeybusinessbook.com on
Yes, I'm getting a copy of this book. I hope everyone else does too.
The way our system has become corrupted. Thank you very much.
A big hand
Could I
for
ask
Kevin.
you to film me while I'm
Speaking
up
out
there?
as a doctor for us.
Just tell me what I have to do.
There are problems right there.
Okay, so just hold it like
We
this.
just need more to speak up. Hopefully this is the snowball effect that we need. Up next, I have Meryl Dory. One of whom was injured by his DTP or DPT vaccine at 1989, and then again by the MMR in 1990. Meryl founded the AVN in 1994 because she was passionate about ensuring that parents would always have the right to make free and informed choices regarding vaccinations and other health-related issues. Welcome, Meryl.
Thank you, Alona, and thank you, everyone. It is, I mean, the word heartwarming comes to mind because I can't think of anything better to say. Just to see everyone out here. You know, I wish all of Australia could see this, but the media, those cowards in the media, they haven't shown up. But we will be our own media because I can't tell you how many people are broadcasting this live on Facebook and on the internet right now. So we will make the media irrelevant because they already are.